Refreshing wild cherry cola meets smooth cream. The treat you deserve. Pepsi Wild Cherry and Cream. Treat yourself.
K-pop Demon Hunters, Haja Boys breakfast meal and Huntrix meal have just dropped at McDonald's. They're calling this a battle for the fans. What do you say to that, Rumi?
It's not a battle. So glad the Saja Boys could take breakfast and give our meal the rest of the day.
It is an honor to share.
No, it's our honor.
It is our larger honor.
No, really. Stop.
You can really feel the respect in this battle. Pick a meal to pick a side.
At participating McDonald's while supplies last.
Welcome back to the Epic Universal Podcast. I'm entertainment writer Jim Hill, and this is the podcast where we cover the latest Universal news, rumors, and history. And as always, I'm joined by Eric Hersey, and once again, we're cutting a little close this week, aren't we?
You know, we're just trying to get the freshest news possible for everyone. We are a banana that, right now we're super, we're just green. Tomorrow we're going to be yellow, and the next day we're just going to be brown, right? Because that's how they work, at least in my house.
I love how optimistic you are about this, as opposed to, poor planning on my part, and we're recording this show on Thursday afternoon to go up on Friday morning. But no, I love your banana, analogy. And speaking of which, you did see come out of CinemaCon this past week, lots of news about the new Minions movie coming out.
Oh, no. See, I saw that the Universal Kids talked about the Minions versus Minions, so that was my banana fix, so I must have not. What do we got going on there?
Well, again, they were just sort of talking up, in fact, I hadn't put this together yet, that it's a Minions Monsters movie, and of course, Universal has its classic Universal Monsters, but evidently this is a movie about how the Minions came to love the movies, and, already I'm kind of intrigued. So, though, speaking of movies, and again, remember, folks, with this podcast, we are contractually obligated to talk about Wicked, which is why I want to mention that as part of today's feature, we're going to talk about what previously had been in where Wicked the Experience is located there on Hollywood Boulevard at Universal Studios, Florida. And back in the day, once upon a time, that was the home to Lucy A Tribute, which our pal Ashley actually suggested as a feature, and it turned out to be a great topic to build a feature around.
Yeah, and I didn't know much about it. I knew Lucy was there, so I'm excited to kind of hear what was in that spot. But I'm also happy that you were able to get once again, we check mark it off. We got Wicked on the scoreboard here, so we're just going to wait for that check that they're going to send us sooner or later. Contractually obligated, but we're waiting for a big check to come in the mail based off of how many weeks we've been able to do that. But yes, good job, Jim. Good job.
I remain ever hopeful. Now, speaking of things that we've asked folks to do, you a few weeks back began asking folks to help out with some reviews of the Epic Universal Podcast, and folks have genuinely come through, right?
Jim, we're going for 100 before 100, and we're on episode 99 right now. Can you believe that? So I just checked this morning, and we are at 95. So 5 more. Can we get 5 more reviews within a week? And then we'll leave you alone. Cool. We'll leave you alone. But I do plan on reading some of these. They're very kind words, but also I appreciate everybody taking time out of their day. So we'll read a few here today if you got a little bit of time. We'll 5-star fantastic pod for the Universal Curious, which was a term that we used early on. So this was from Lindsay 740. Eric's journey to explore Universal has been awesome, and it's amazing how quickly he went from curious to super fan. I love everything Jim Hill does, so this combo is truly epic. Thank you, Lindsay.
Thanks, Mom.
Yeah. So. Here's one, a staple, 5 stars for Mariana. I love the theme park podcast on this network and is one, especially a big Universal fan. Jim brings so much knowledge, and it's fun listening to Eric, a newcomer to Universal, discover and learn about the parks. So, yes, that has been fun, and that's a little bit what we'll be doing today and continue to do. And then we got one from Scooby Debo. Skeptical at first. When this podcast relaunched with a co-host, I have never been to Universal Park as skeptical skeptical. But as it progressed, I realized that as someone who has been going to Universal for years, we get to relive the first time we experience attractions through their eyes. I do wish they'd talk more about Universal Studios Florida. That was, and the old attractions Eric will never get to experience. And guess what? Scooby Debo, we get to do that a little bit today with the Lucy feature. So
we do.
We got, Jim, 5 more, and we make it easy. If you go to jimhillmedia.com/epic, it takes you right to the review page that you can leave, and we are promising that we'll keep reading them as long as you keep giving them. So thanks again to Lindsay, Mariana, and Scooby. Everybody that's left reviews so far, it's wonderful, and it really does help us move up in the algorithm. More people find us, more people in the community, so we appreciate that.
Okay, cool. And speaking of people we appreciate, we also very thankful to the nice folks at unlockmagic.com who sponsor this podcast. And speaking of which, if you are planning a trip to Universal Orlando or Walt Disney World, check out Unlock Magic. Listeners of the Epic Universal podcast are saving up to 12% on theme park tickets and now have the ability to purchase Express Pass through Unlock Magic, saving even more money. So be sure and visit unlockmagic.com and save today. So, all right, we now get to the news portion of this podcast. And Eric, what did you manage to chase down this week as you were looking for Universal-related news around the web?
I don't think I had to look very hard because this hit everywhere. I think it might have been yesterday. Did you see that we now have a single ride express pass at Epic Universe? And essentially we have what I guess the Universal fans would say is the single pass like lightning lane of Disney. That is, it just kind of rolled out. Everyone was talking about this, and it is right now, Universal Express Pass Now is what they're calling it, allows guests to pay up to $25 per ride for one-time access to the express queue at select attractions, purchase same day in the park through the app. Jim, do you have any thoughts on this?
And this $25 is for a single ride on a single attraction? Is that how this works?
Yeah, so right now they're testing it with, I believe we saw it for Stardust Racers, we saw it for Yoshi's Adventure, and Hiccup's Wing Gliders. So, and it supposedly changes. I mean, granted, it just came out and they're just starting this, so it could change. Do you remember last year, I kind of think we made fun of it, that they tested this for the Mummy and King Kong? Do you remember that?
That's right.
And we're like, why? Why would you do that? But it seems like they're trying it now. And once again, I'm almost like, why are you going to do that for Yoshi's? But surprisingly enough, Yoshi sometimes gets a wait.
It does. You know, when it's working, all right, I don't mean to be mean. But every time I've been into Super Nintendo Land down at Epic Universe, Yoshi is staying there very still. Haven't actually seen it in motion. That and Donkey Kong. I want to say, I should go in there with oil paints, and paint a still life, because that's what I get.
Yeah, so not so friendly. But in this case, Jim, I think, at first I looked at it and I scoffed, and I'm like, oh, not another pay to play kind of a thing. Like, truthfully, as a theme park fan, I'm kind of tired of having to think of 20 different options. But I almost feel like, and I looked this up and I couldn't find anywhere. Now, over at Disney, to do the single lightning lanes, you honestly have to also buy the lightning lane for the day, right? Like, you couldn't just do Tron for $12 or $13 or $50, whatever. You actually have to buy the full plan, and then you get access to do this. I could not find anywhere where that said this, and if that's the case, I think this is a smart and a actual beneficial play, because for someone like myself, I might fork out $25 to do the one ride. Let's say you do it for Ministry of Magic, and I would very much likely be able to say, all right, the family, we're going to do this for $100, as opposed to saying, hey, we're going to buy this for everyone for $400, and then we also have to pay $100 on top of that. So I don't think it's a bad plan. I don't think it's super complex as what Disney is doing. And this is a possible way that they can slowly roll it out. You don't do it in advance. It has to be day of. I don't think you can plan on it. But maybe a way they recoup some of that money in Epic, especially since maybe the capacity isn't increasing to the point where they wanted to make some up of some of that money they spent. And
let's just be completely blunt here. I mean, this is this is money they're leaving on the table. I mean, when you think about the day of customer who's standing, walks up to attraction, sees a line, wants to do it, and realizes, okay, if I lay out $25, I jump to the head of the line. It's like I'm here on my once every 3 years vacation, to Universal. Let's go. I mean, it's a smart decision on Universal's part. So
yeah, and I think they'll be making that is adding the average spend of the guest, right? That is their whole thing, is to make sure that somebody is spending more money in the park while they're there, and this is an easy play. And I guess at some point in time you might say, all right, well, what should we just got the regular Express Pass all the way? So I don't know what the tipping point is, but I think the Express Pass is what, 200. Can be upwards of 300 a day. So this is a nice, healthy alternative, but we wonder to see what would happen to the actual wait lines. If everybody is doing this, standby isn't going to get any shorter, right?
No, it's not. But just want to put this out there then, folks, that if you opt to do this Universal Express Pass now, we'd love to hear about your experience on our future show. So please let us know if you took advantage of this and what your experience was.
Yeah, absolutely. Jim, did you see that? I mean, I know you saw this. Did you see the portals now have face recognition scanners?
I have seen the photos of people sort of loitering in the space with Universal team members. Do we have any info on how this actually works?
I don't know if anybody's actually been doing it yet, because I think the photos I saw is, hey, they have the scanners here. I don't think they're really using it yet. I imagine, remember, once again, you can almost tie back to a lot of things we talked about in past of like, hey, they're testing this, they're testing this. There were testing face scanners for a lot of the Express Passes throughout the last year on different random attractions. Again, I think E.T. was one. I imagine that's what this is going to be, right? And they're just going to find out if you have a valid ticket and you can make it through the portal. And this is the effective way that everybody is hypothesizing that they're going to close off portals and let everybody in to Celestial Park for nighttime shows or after 6, or that is all what everybody is saying online. And then you hear people giving pros and cons of both. And I see both. I'm like, if Blue Dragon and Atlantic is empty at 6 p.m., they have every right to try to get people to come in to eat there.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And worth noting, I don't know if you saw on social media just last night, evidently they were doing fireworks tests inside of the park after hours.
Right.
So whatever this is getting closer to reality. If we're seeing both these tests of the portals and the fireworks thing, and I think we were mentioning on just last week's Epic Universal podcast that they had drained the fountain, getting it prepped for this show.
I think they even posted a couple more jobs. I think at this point in time they have 3 or 4 jobs out there for the fireworks technician. So the show's coming, right? Now it's just a matter who gets to see it. Now here's an interesting question that you would have. All right, I just paid $200 to go to Epic,
right? And
now I have somebody who just walked in later that night and they're blocking my view, or I can't stand where I want. Like, who's going to deal with that? I know they have a beautiful customer service location, but are they going to?
That's an interesting question. On the other hand, the very thing you just said about Blue Dragon, the notion of, you got this wonderful restaurant that's not doing capacity. In fact, just to be clear here, that's not Universal's fault. In fact, Len and I recorded a Disney Dish today, and Len had evidently come across that there are table service restaurants at Disney World right now that are peaking at 55%. That they typically have a quarter of their normal sit down, and some of that, by the way, does come at the price of Lightning Lane. The people are spending money that they would normally spend on food that are looking, to jump a line, and then they're going, well, we're gonna split a quick service, hot dog because we just blew the dinner budget.
We've done it, Jim. I mean, I tell you right now, we've absolutely done it in our house. It's a matter of like, hey, what do we want to do today? We'll buy Genie Plus or we're going to eat quick service. So I know it happens. This is just going to be very interesting to see what's happening with this space. and see how they utilize it. But we all know that we kind of think the face technology is to block off the portals.
Oh, no,
right?
Absolutely. And at the same time, you just have to look at it cold-bloodedly from food and beverage point of view and merch point of view. If this translates, you're going to get some guests who complain that I paid full freight to get in here for the full day, and now I've got all of these, last-minute jokers stepping in and preventing me from getting, my front row seat to the nighttime spectacular. But if, on the other hand, the restaurants and the stores start doing significantly better at night, how does Universal Florida not suck it up? Or more to the point, how do they not have somebody at guest relations go, I'm so sorry, here's a free express pass to make up for your bad experience?
Well, you know what could happen, Jim, and I mean, I haven't looked at it. Well, maybe we get the eye in the sky or friendly neighborhood Spider-Man to look at it, but is there premium seating? Could they put face technologies for premium seating, and if you have a ticket, you get to go in there?
Wow.
So there's ways they can do it. It'll be interesting.
That's fascinating if you suggest that, because they're supposedly seating for 5,000 people around that fountain.
There you go.
So, wow, hadn't even thought of that. Oh, okay, all right.
We'll see.
We'll see. All right. What else you got?
All right, we're going to go into the survey portal right now. We're going to go through the Epic survey because the next three topics are all about different surveys, so it's speculation time. The first one is there are surveys out there that Universal is considering discounted annual pass status match of Walt Disney World pass holders. So this was all over the internet. I found this story from Yahoo. But the surveys are out there essentially saying, hey, would you be interested in buying a Universal annual pass if you are an annual pass of Disney, and we would match that in terms of almost saying, hey, you're an annual pass at Disney, we'll give you a discount for our annual pass. Interesting concept. Have you seen anything like this?
Oh, boy. Oh, wow. Okay. That's a really smart play. I mean, because face it, if you're an annual pass holder at Disney and you've been holding out in regard to Universal, the notion that, first of all, they recognize your status, and it's like, hey, you're already special. You're an annual pass holder for Disney. Come over here. You can be an annual pass holder with us, and we'll give you a discount. Boy, that's a smart play.
Yeah, I mean, you already know your target audience, the people that are obviously there, and you're essentially saying, hey, let's add on. So they're happy to get, they're not necessarily being greedy. They might not need the entire thing, but they know that, hey, we'll just want to get you over here. And you're still not doing the Epic because it's not available. So I know the questions keep coming out is, when is Epic coming available, this and that. And I don't know if there's a near end to it, but did you know it just ended on the 14th, because we just took advantage of it. We all got our annual passes. They were offering a buy 12 months and you get an extra 3 months add-on.
Oh.
So to me, the question I have is, do you think their annual pass sales are light right now because people are holding out for Epic, which therefore means some of the parks that people normally would visit on a weekend, this or that, the other parks are getting light in traffic from the locals?
I don't know what to tell you here because, face it, it's still Universal. It's still, Mardi Gras. Even the two main parks, Islands and Studios, still have, hugely popular Harry Potter lands for folks like yourself who, need a butterbeer fix every 6 to 8 weeks. So even with, Epic Universe kind of, the over the horizon, just, kind of out of reach, a lot of the year. The other parks at the right price point, and I guess that's the other thing. I'd be fascinated as to what they'd be willing to charge a Disney annual pass holder, what sort of discount they'd offer them for a Universal annual pass. Because again, the notion is that if you can get them to the door and they buy a couple of meals or a couple of T-shirts, you've made back that discount.
Well, there's a huge gap though. And I'll put cap on this one. The discount, or we got annual passes I think we got the Power Pass, which is, there's literally not that many blackout dates. There are some, but not a tremendous amount.
Okay.
And it was $500, right? Compared to Disney, if you're not in state, you're looking at $1,000. There's 50% less right off the get-go. So you could probably get somebody, give them for $400 to get a Power Pass, give them $100 off or so forth, and get them over. So, I mean, I think Universal's annual passes are already a better deal per se, even without Epic. Disney is way overpriced in annual passes, and they just keep adding the price every single year, and it's rough.
No. And remember that we've shared this story previously on the Epic Universal podcast, but I had folks involved in the Endless Summer project who literally talked about with that hotel. In fact, they told the other hotels on iDrive directly around there, look, I'm really sorry, but we're going to operate this hotel at a loss for 7 years. Just with the notion with the notion that over 7 years, typically they'll get 2 visits from the same family. And that'll be enough for them to emotionally bond with that hotel and keep coming back. And so that's the thing. That's the interesting thing about Comcast. They like the theme park game, and they're also willing to play the long game, which is like, we'll lose a little money now, but we'll make this up further down the line when they bond with our park, when this becomes their special place as opposed to the Magical Kingdom just up the street.
Yeah. Well, let's move to Hollywood. The next 2 surveys came through. That is very interesting. So the next survey almost suggests that they're going to monkey around with the operating hours, which is not that unique considering, right? A lot of questions were like, hey, were the operating hours of your last visit sufficient? Did you get everything done that you wanted to? Would you suggest these hours? Would it be better guest satisfaction? All this leading to what, Jim? Why do you think they care about operating hours right now in Hollywood?
I actually, what's kind of interesting is me and Lauren had a conversation about this in March when we were in the park, because we were looking at the fact that the park was going to be closing at 6:00 at night. And, you guys had just spent 2 and 3 days before coming down to Universal Hollywood at Disney, which was staying open till at least 9, some nights till 11 or midnight. Right?
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
So this was already front of mind, to the effect of, look, I'm having a good time here, but you're also chasing me out the door at 6:00 at night. And don't get me wrong, I get that on the nights where, for example, later this month, we will be getting FanFest. But a 6:00 close seemed early to me, didn't it to you? Or
Yeah. Do you think it might have anything to do with the projected crowds for this Fast and Furious ride, and many people that say, "Hey, we didn't get on it because the lines were too long"? Do you think that? I mean, granted, I would hope that the lines aren't 8 hours long, but I mean, for the most part, if you're waiting in line, let's say it's a 3-hour wait because it's new theme coaster, big coaster, and then you didn't get to do anything else. I don't know. I feel like that they might be adding some time, and I don't know if historically the park has been open longer than that. But if it's from 10 to 6, I don't know. Like you could be open till 8. Plus, you might even get more money from a dinner crowd. Like I don't even think we ate there because I was like, all right, we weren't even hungry yet.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't think you're wrong there. I think Fast and Furious Hollywood Drift, when it finally opens, it is going to be a big draw. Everybody who's a theme park enthusiast in Southern California is going to want to try that at least once, especially, I mean, just think about it, just the videos that people are going to be taking with their phones of that thing, whether it's from inside the park or standing on the Starway, and, watching those things spin around, that's going to be a must do. But, it's hard to do a must do when the park closes at 6:00 at night. So, nice that they're paying attention to this issue.
All right. Last question. This one's fairly interesting, and it seemed mundane when the survey was sent over to us, but it was probably asking, what was your main purpose to going to Southern California? What other theme parks did you visit? And then as you went through, it seemed more and more as if they were trying to say, what do we need to do to be your main destination, as opposed to being an add-on to Disneyland or an add-on to Knott's Berry? Jim, I hate to say it, but is it possible for Universal, Hollywood to be the mainstay? I mean, it is not big enough to be a 3-4 day park. Like, are they considering things? Like, could they team up with other studios? Like, what could they possibly do to say this is now a destination where you need to come for 3 days?
Well, okay. Realistically, remember, while you and I were out there, we were watching them do all sorts of work around the entrance security complex because, the one of the worst kept secrets in all of Southern California is that there is a third hotel coming that will be right by the entrance to Universal Studios Hollywood. Also, remember, we also missed out on the opportunity to experience, Fast and Furious, the original grand finale of the tram tour, because that closed. And, there are persistent rumors about expanding down there, especially, with the rumors about maybe they're doing a Diagon Alley for California. And, it as has been proven with Super Nintendo World and to watch the people who race down, the Starway every day to get to that, you put the right IP in that park and people will come. And and remember, we were just talking about how Comcast loves this business and, has been spending big dough on the lower lot, working on back of house to free up space that potentially could become new theme park attractions. So I think this is, a Universal sort of taking the temperature of, okay, compared to surveys past, how are we doing? Yeah. And then say in a year and a half after Fast and Furious is open, Hollywood Drift, it's like, okay, did that move the needle? What else do we need to do? And just sort of watching what happens with this park because, and again, to just sort of bring things full circle to what we talked about on a recent show, if the rumors are true in regard to 2028, Springfield goes away. And it's like, that's another opportunity. I mean, it's a challenge to replace that ride in that area. But on the other hand, if you pick the right AP that fits into that corner of the park and can make use of that ride building, Zelda?
No, everybody's screaming Pokemon, Jim.
Okay, Pokemon.
That's the one scream. Who knows? There's a lot of opportunities, but it's just interesting to see. Like, it would be interesting to see if they could get more individuals staying on their property and then commuting to the other lands, where right now it seems as if it's the other way around. Yeah. And I think that's what they're definitely taking the temperature and seeing what's there. So it'll be interesting. What we do is we report this stuff the front half of every show. Mm-hmm. So we will let you know and kind of follow along as we've done for the last 99 episodes.
There we go. Coming up on Big 100. Okay. And speaking of coming up, that basically wraps up the news for this week. So we need to get to our feature, which again comes on the heels of our suggestion by our good friend Ashley. And we're going to take a look at Lucy, a tribute, which was both Universal Florida as well as Hollywood. But before we do that, there's this.
There's no one like you, and there never will be.
From the producer of Bohemian Rhapsody, there are many legends, but there is only one. Michael, rated PG-13, in theaters April 24.
Half Man, the new HBO original limited series from Baby Reindeer creator Richard Gadd, examines the tumultuous relationship between two estranged brothers, tracking the highs and lows of the pair over the course of 40 years. Starring Emmy Award winner Richard Gadd and BAFTA Award winner Jamie Bell. Half Man premieres April 23rd on HBO Max.
And we're back. Eric, when we were putting together this week's show, you had mentioned that Ashley had previously reached out and wanted to hear about Lucy, a Tribute, which, as I mentioned, had been an attraction at both out in California and down in Florida. In fact, the California version opened back on March 22nd, 1991, whereas the second one opened at Universal Studios Florida some 14 months later in May of 1992. And again, contractually obligated in the same building where Wicked the Experience is today. So have you ever seen any photos of this or any of the videos that are out there online? Or
I knew Lucy was there as a walk around, I believe, but I had no idea there was a show. Yeah, I mean, even when we went and before the Wicked Experience, it was like some type of Hello Kitty shop.
Yes.
It was like it was so there wasn't. So this is well beyond my time, and I guess I just don't run in the Lucy crowd that I saw this prior to. But I'm interested to hear because this is super interesting.
Well, yeah, and now what's interesting about both of these attractions, which by the way were filled with really for real Lucy memorabilia that was provided by Lucy Arnez, who was Ball's own daughter. But they were only supposed to be in place for 5 years, Eric. But the Universal Studios Hollywood version, it hung in there till January of 2008, whereas the Universal Florida version, that hung in there till August of 2015. So we're talking Hollywood for 17 years, Florida for 23 years. So,
wow.
So I guess it's true. People really do love Lucy. And, by the way, speaking of I Love Lucy, the sitcom that turned Lucille Ball into television's first female superstar, it's celebrating its 75th anniversary later this year. The I Love Lucy TV show, it debuted on CBS back in October of 1951 and then ran on the Tiffany network for the next 6 years. And these days, people are like, oh, my God, we got 21 episodes of a show this season. Wow, look at all the entertainment we got. The 6 years that Lucy was on the air, they produced 180 episodes. That's 30 episodes a season,
Oh, just enough for syndication, Jim. They just made it.
Yeah, God, but as for Lucille Ball's ties to the Universal Studio Tour, well, those actually date back to 1968, which was when her third series for CBS, the Here's Lucy show, that was actually shot on Soundstage 24 on the Universal lot in Hollywood. And in fact, for the 6 years that show ran on CBS, it was in production from 67 through March of 74. When she wasn't actually in her dressing room or when the show wasn't in production, if you went on the Universal Tram Tour, they would stop the tram and you could get off and walk through Lucille Ball's dressing room.
Wow.
In fact, Eric, this was considered such a highlight of that version of the Universal Tram Tour that the park, in fact, you can go on eBay today and buy it. They used to sell a postcard of the interior of Lucille Ball's dressing room, and she was very into green plush. But anyway, given that, in this era of the park's history, that visiting Lucille Ball's dressing room was such a big deal, such a big part of the Universal Tram Tour, that when we lost Lucy in April of 1989 at the age of 77. Well, Miss Arnez, who, by the way, was on the Here's Lucy show. She actually played her mom's daughter on the show. She played Kim Carter, the Lucille Carter's daughter. And so she's now got the task of cleaning up her mom's house after we've lost Lucy. And look, Eric, there's no polite way to put this. Miss Ball was something of a hoarder. She hung on to everything. And so, here's poor Lucy Arnaz going through closet after closet and the sheds in the backyard filled with props and costumes and photographs. And she's thinking back to pleasant times she had with her mom. She really enjoyed shooting the TV show. And she knew how important it was to her mom that, people, got to visit her dressing room at Universal. And she was like, maybe I should contact them. And so she reaches out to Universal Creative and says, well, look, I have everything that my mom ever, every prop, every costume, and, you guys had people walk through the dressing room. How would you feel about, I don't know, a Lucy museum? Would you guys be interested in that? And Universal Creative was like, oh God, yes. Oh my God, yes, we'd love that. And here's the thing that, like, if you give us the stuff, we'll give, you give us the gem, we'll build a beautiful setting for it. And so, Eric, what they did is they got a budget of $1.4 million. And, well, first of all, they're like, well, where are we going to put this? And it's like, well, of course, we're going to put it right outside of stage 24, where she used to shoot her TV show. Okay. And not only that, but the building, if you're looking at it coming down the Starway, you're going to see that, oh my God, the building is heart-shaped, just like the I Love Lucy logo. Ah. But inside of it, they just the crazy attention to detail. Because, again, Lucy Arnaz gave them everything. Her mom's Emmys, bound scripts. In fact, in one corner of the Hollywood version of this, there was actually furniture from Lucille Ball's living room with the backgammon board that she'd play with friends whenever they came to visit her at the house. And more to the point, Universal was really, really excited about doing this, because, well, think about it. Disney MGM had just opened in April of 1989. In fact, Eric, weird bend on this story. The very same week that theme park opened is when we lost Lucy at 77. Oh, wow. Yeah, but anyone who remembers the old Superstar television show, one of the highlights of that was a recreation of a really memorable episode of the I Love Lucy show. It was the one where Ethel and Lucy are working on the conveyor belt at the candy factory, and and their supervisor was like, speed it up.
She's eating chocolates, putting it in her shirt. Yeah, and they had everybody do that, right? It was in front of her green screen. That was what you were doing in there. They're very prominent in the promo videos of Disney MGM early on.
Absolutely. And so, so Universal knew that this one moment in the Superstar television thing, this one tribute to I Love Lucy was hugely popular to the, folks visiting a Disney theme park. And here they were going to have a whole museum that paid tribute to Lucille Ball. So they're like, this is going to be huge. And it was.
And you wonder why people got tribal. It's just like we're one-upping each other each time, right? It's just, you do this, I'm going to do this. It's a funny time.
It is. But again, this opens, I want to say March of 91, is a hit right out of the box. So much so that Lucy at this point, she comes out for the ribbon cutting, and the folks from Orlando are there, to check out the latest thing. And she strikes up a conversation with this, my mother has other closets. It's like, in fact, if you want to talk about this, we could do this again in Orlando. And they're like, could we? Really? And it's like, absolutely. And so May of the next year, 1992. In fact, what was interesting about this is when the park first opened in June of 1990, there was a shop at the top of Hollywood Boulevard. It was called Silver Screen Collectibles. And, and that was the thing. Going into Florida, they weren't going to build a brand new custom built building, but they were willing to surrender this piece of real estate. I mean, literally, you know this spot, Eric, because you've walked into that park. It's 100, maybe 150 feet from the entrance.
One of the first things you see.
There we go.
It's like prime real estate.
Absolutely. And the fact that they were willing to hand this over, change it from a shop to a Lucy display, which, by the way, had a teeny tiny little store in it where you could buy Lucy stuff. They were perfectly happy to do that. And but the kicker, the absolute kicker to this story, Eric, is that again, Lucy Hernandez is still at home, still with full closets, still with full sheds. And it turns out that Lucy's old hometown, Jamestown, New York, raises its hand, and it's like, well, we'd love to do a museum that pays tribute to your mom and your dad, Desi Arnaz. And she's like, send the U-Haul. And that's what they did. 1996. So now you had 3 different displays of Lucy memorabilia, all of them one of a kind, all thrilling to fans of the TV show. And what's interesting is that attraction proves to be so popular in Jamestown, New York, that when the National Comedy Center, which is up until the late 2000, early 2010s, is sort of this loose collection of props and things that comedians have donated over the years, because they're like, America should have a museum of comedy. And and when it ultimately came time to, where are we going to build this thing? And it's like, well, the Lucy Museum in Jamestown, New York gets over 60,000 people a year. Why don't we just build it up the street from that? So in 2018, they opened the National Comedy Center just up the street from, and what's so funny is, again, here's Lucy Hernandez. It's like, well, I'm still cleaning out closets. So, do you want something from my mom and dad? Because I can send that along. And they also have displays there of, stuff that, celebrating these 2 people who started the form of the sitcom.
Jim, I don't know if Lucy Arnaz is still alive, but it feels like she's going to text us afterwards and be like, hey, you just did a tribute on Lucy. Do you want some stuff for your podcast studio? I feels like she still probably has some stuff. And
by the way, she is still out there. In fact, when we get back from this break, she's still working on stuff related to her mom. But we'll talk about what sort of project now in a moment. But first, this.
We all have that dream trip we've been wishing we could go on, but too often life, or usually price, gets in the way. That's why Priceline is here to help you turn your dream trip into reality. With up to 60% off hotels and up to 50% off flights, you can book everything you need for your next adventure. Don't just dream about that next trip. Book it with Priceline. Download the Priceline app or visit Priceline.com and book your next trip today.
Go to your happy price, Priceline.
Spring Black Friday is on at the Home Depot. Save on grills and patio sets that will be sure to bring your hosting game up a notch. Fire up your feast with help from the Home Depot and save on grills. Like the Next Grill 4-burner propane gas grill was $249, now in special buy for $199. Or give everyone the best seat in the yard with the Hampton Bay Mayfield Park 4-piece conversation set for only $399. Save on grills and patio sets with low prices guaranteed during Spring Black Friday only at the Home Depot. Now through April 22nd, while supplies last. Exclusions apply. See homedepot.com/price match for details.
And we're back. All right. We haven't talked about Disney for a few minutes, so let's just pivot for a moment to the groundbreaking of Disney MGM, which happened back in March of 1986. And, so who's there at the event? Have you ever seen any of the photographs or the video from this, Eric?
From 86? No, I don't think so. No, I don't. I've seen the grand opening and all the other, but this would have been just shovels in the ground, I'm guessing?
Well, they did have sort of a backdrop of what Hollywood Boulevard was supposed to look like on opening day. But yeah, it was literally, let's go out to a big smelly field, and put shovels in the ground, and it's Florida, and it really smells bad here. But it's Michael Eisner and comedy legend Bob Hope, who, by the way, starred in 4 feature films with Lucille Ball. Sorrowful Jones in 1949, Fancy Pants in 1950, The Facts of Life in 1960, and then Critics' Choice in 1963. So they were good friends. But what was interesting is that Bob Hope, like Lucille Ball, kept everything. And he wanted, in fact, he was determined to convince the Disney company as part of their MGM Studio theme park that you really want to have the Bob Hope Comedy Museum. And Bob kept pitching and pitching and pitching. And in fact, you mentioned the opening day of Disney MGM, which happened May of '89. If you look at the photographs and the videos from that day, here's Michael Eisner walking the first family up Hollywood Boulevard to take part in a handprint ceremony. But who's there right alongside him? Bob Hope, who's still, you want to build a comedy museum? You really, really do. And I got props and I got things. And this was the tough part. Eisner, prior to coming to Disney, had been in charge of Paramount Pictures, which is where Bob Hope spent like 30 years of his career making movies. So this was kind of personal when Michael Eisner was like, yeah, thank you, Mr. Hope, but no. What do you mean you're turning me down? But he did, and he never got his museum going. And we lose Bob in 2003, and then his wife Dolores, who was supposed to take up the project, she was like, yeah, no. And we lose her in 2011, so it then comes down to Bob's daughter, Linda, who is 93 this year, but she has managed to get a couple of Bob Hope temporary exhibits up and running. For example, there was one that just was staged at the National Museum of the Air Force, which is in Dayton, Ohio. They had, something there. But that was the thing, that Linda Hope tried, whereas Lucy Arnaz delivered the goods, and she kept going. In fact, but one of the things that she did that guaranteed that her mom lived on, especially in a theme park setting, Eric, is that she said, you know what you should do? You should have a walk-around character inside of the theme park who's playing Lucy Ricardo. And Universal is like, you'd do that? You'd let us do your mom. Boy, that's an unfortunate sentence. No, you'd let somebody, us hire a performer to portray Lucy Ricardo in the park. And she's like, absolutely. And so what ends up happening is they hire this really talented woman, Suzanne LaRouche, who, in fact, she comes into the park when the Lucia tribute exhibit opens again in March of '91, and people are just thrilled. They walk out of seeing the actual props, and here's somebody, here's Lucy Ricardo, like, oh, can I hang on? I want to tell you about Vita Vita Vegemin, and for 9 years she plays Lucy in the park, and people love her. But again, over time, Susan, decides to hang up her red wig and her black polka dot dress, and another talented woman, Diane Vincent, takes up Lucy Ricardo's mantle in the Universal theme parks, especially in Hollywood. And Diane stays on the job, Eric, for 25 years. In fact, she was playing Lucy, and she, by the way, an authorized Lucy portrayer. In fact, again, that literally means that Lucy Arnaz has seen you work, has signed off on you, trusts you to play the character, and she did the job for 25 years. And only this past November did Universal, looking over, the money they're spending on putting in that Fast and Furious, Hollywood Drift. That's very expensive. We got to cut some expenses here. So we're going to let the theme park rights to having Lucille Ball lapse. Which, again, for a lot of annual pass holders, was a sad occasion because they loved hanging out with Lucy. They love, in fact, what's genuinely interesting is you can go on YouTube right now and watch these really heartfelt videos of folks who actually went into the park on November 30th of last year so they could get one last encounter with Lucy Ricardo. And to give Diane Vincent credit, she was a class act till the very moment she stepped off stage. When people would say, we're going to miss you, and I'd say, oh, you'll see me in reruns. And it's like, well, why are you leaving? So, well, I got to go back to New York. The Mercs have been holding Ricky in my apartment this whole time. I got to go home. And she had the right answers, and she handled it beautifully. And I want to also mention that Ms. Vincent is still in the employ of Universal. She actually plays Gabby the Cabbie. She's another one of the characters up on the upper lot. You meet...
She's screaming at us from a window? Is that what that... Is she one of those?
Actually, those are her buddies. That often it's not. She's down by the cab yelling up at the two people who are in the window who were hassling you and I.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
And by the way, she still is playing Lucy. In fact, she was just talking about... she did an interview, I want to say, with Parade Magazine. We were talking about just recently she got hired by a winery in California and redid the grape stomping scene from that Lucy episode. And so she's still out there playing Lucy, if you know where to look. But meanwhile, of course, Lucy Arnaz is, still doing stuff related to her mom and dad. In fact, she's working on a brand new project for television. It's called Desi and Lucy, The Greatest Story Never Told, and supposedly the behind-the-scenes story of how the I Love Lucy show came together. And I want to close out today's feature by pointing out that the very last time that Universal did this, that they opted not to renew the theme park rights to a walk-around character, it bit them in the ass in a big way, Eric. This was December of 2008. And again, just one of those times where somebody's going over the books and it's like, how much are we paying for Spider-Man and Wolverine and Storm? Ooh. Do we really want to spend that money again in 2009? And so they let the rights lapse. And that's the reason Mr. Hershey is making those noises. He knows where I'm going here, that in August of 2009, the Disney company buys Marvel Entertainment for $4 billion. But because Universal had let the theme park rights lapse on the West Coast, that's why you can do the Marvel characters at California Adventure. Because somebody at Universal let that slip through their hands for pennies on the dollar.
Wow.
So just saying, every so often when you let a character, theme park rights for a character go, it can sometimes circle around, and who knows? This thing that Lucy Arnaz is working on, it turns out to be a hit show.
I was going to say, I'm pretty sure I saw her in the Doomsday trailer. So
there we go.
Oh, no, Jim, that was fascinating. And the thing is, it's interesting. Kind of as you were going through this, I'm like, how many people even in 1991 knew who Lucille Ball was? But this is the prime time of Nick at Night.
Oh,
we knew Dick Van Dyke and the Mary Tyler Moore Show, and I'm thinking, why would I know Lucille Ball? And I'm like, well, it's because Nick at Night. That's just, I watched Nickelodeon throughout the day, and it was on at nighttime, and you watch these old reruns, and I could see why they wouldn't renew, because now Nick at Night is, I believe they're playing The Office, probably. I mean, they're just you're Big Bang Theory,
you're
like
not
Friends.
Wrong. You're not wrong. You're not wrong.
So. And one last thing, I will tell you, Lucy Arnaz, for any of you Disney folk out there that love those made-for-TV specials, she was the host of the 1975 introduction to Space Mountain. She was the host and did sing and dance, and she was a personality and very quirky, and I know who she was from just watching that made-for-television special where they're going to Space Mountain. So, glad that she is, keeping her mom's vision and I guess memory in tow, and I guess I'm glad also that Vincent is still stomping on grapes somewhere.
There we go. Well, anyway, just as we close this, I want to thank our pal Ashley for suggesting this, because again, it was one of those things where, is there a story there? And oh God, was there a story there? So thanks for that suggestion.
Absolutely.
And that is going to do it for this week folks, for the Epic Universal podcast with Eric Hersey. And by the way, if you have topics and suggestions like our lovely friend Ashley had, feel free to send those along to myself and Eric through social media. And I guess that's going to do it for this week's show. So thanks for listening. And Eric and I will be back with our big 100th episode next week. So till then, take care.